Joining me now from Salt Lake City, Utah, is retired U.S. Special Forces Sergeant First Class Lane Morris. Mr. Morris was blinded in one eye during the 2002 firefight in Afghanistan involving Omar Khadr. Nice to see you, Mr. Morris.
It's nice to see you, Rosemary.
Okay, so the settlement has happened. Omar Khadr has the money. He has the apology. What are you doing to actively try and go after some of that money, or are you doing anything?
Certainly, I have a dedicated team of lawyers that have been working on that, will continue to work on trying to recover some of that money that a court has already ruled, has issued a judgment for, I think it's $145 million in our favor. So they'll continue to try and pursue that money.
That happened in a U.S. court, though, so I guess you need to somehow get jurisdiction here in Canada to try and access some of it. Is that what your lawyers are telling you?
That's right, and that's what they're working on, both with U.S. lawyers and then lawyers there in Canada.
And what are they telling you about the opportunity or whether that might actually happen?
Well, certainly the Canadian government's cover-up in this matter and their attempt to shield Omar from any kind of legal process in that matter has been significant and has definitely made it much more difficult. But the attorneys, they're good attorneys, and I think they'll continue to try and make that happen.
The government says that they did not try in any way to, intervene in this lawsuit, that they weren't trying to prevent you from going after the money. But you don't believe that, it doesn't sound like.
No, it's, that's just you hate to call somebody a liar, but that's so far from the truth. This was a deliberate attempt by Mr. Trudeau and the Canadian government to not only pay Omar, but to do so in a way surreptitiously and give him a head start so that he could secure those funds and get them as far away from other people as possible. So they've picked their side, and I guess that should be no surprise, but it doesn't mean it's any less disturbing or upsetting to any right-thinking person. Under what alternative reality do you give a convicted terrorist with a history of money laundering, funding, international funding?
Well,
how do you give that person a check for $10.5 million?
Just for fact-checking basis, he's not actually a convicted terrorist. He agreed to a plea deal, which he says he did in order to get out of Guantanamo Bay. So there is a difference, and I know that he wants that to be overturned in a U.S. court, as other detainees of Guantanamo Bay have attempted to do as well, just for accuracy's sake. But the Supreme Court of
Rosemary,
yes.
he's been convicted in the. I was there. He's been convicted at Guantanamo in a trial, and this is what the Canadian government and his attorneys and Mr. Trudeau continue to try and pick and choose from the legal outcomes and use the legal system whenever it suits them and jump in and out of the politics. The conviction stands. The politics have overruled that, and I guess that's the most disturbing part to me.
I would agree that politics have played a big part in this story, certainly. But as you know, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled a number of times, and very definitively in 2010, that the Canadian government failed Omar Khadr in terms of upholding his rights under Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I guess they felt that they needed to address that, given that Omar Khadr had sued the government. What would you rather they have done? Fought it in the courts? What do you think would have been the better outcome for the government?
The best outcome for this would have been the Obama administration not shipping Omar Khadr out of Guantanamo back to Canada and turning him loose on the streets. So, and before that, the best solution would have been Omar Khadr's father was not freed from a Pakistani jail for bombing U.S. embassies, 2 decades ago. So we continue to double down on the stupid in this case, Rosemary, and now we're to the point where it makes it difficult to look back and say, at what point should we have realized how stupid we were behaving? And in the case of Mr. Trudeau, he seems to continue to want to double down on that.
But I guess again, this is the government's argument, is that there is a difference between what Khadr did in Afghanistan versus how he was treated in Guantanamo Bay. And the government felt like they weren't going to win that case when it came to how he was treated in Guantanamo Bay. Do you not want to make that distinction, or those two things are too connected for you?
Those things are connected for me, but again, if you are a supporter of Omar Khadr, a groupie, so to speak, and Mr. Trudeau definitely falls into that category, then you look for any excuse possible and you pick and choose from the legal opinions that are out there on what you need to do. And he was more than happy, jumped at the opportunity to pay Omar Khadr $10.5 million, shield him from any possible legal repercussions from giving him that 10.5. Yeah. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that we're simply following the law, but then simply inject your except anytime you want and remove Omar Khadr from that. It doesn't work that way.
Except
it is working
except
that way.
Mr. Morris, rights apply to everyone, whether the person is good or bad. Their rights get the same level of protection, whether they're a good person or a bad person. And so I would take issue with the notion that the government jumped at a settlement. That's not how I read it here, but I understand from your perspective why you would say that.
I certainly think that there was an anxiousness and a happiness to jump at this, and I don't accede to the fact that his rights were violated. Certainly, Mr. Trudeau has jumped at the opportunity at a legal opinion that his rights were violated. Certainly, all of our rights ought to be respected.
It is a legal.
I don't think Omar Khadr's rights have been violated.
It's a legal opinion from our Supreme Court, so it is the highest legal opinion that you could have when it comes to a determination of that.
Certainly, your Supreme Court can say what they want. Our Supreme Court in the United States can say what they want.
Yeah.
He's been convicted in the U.S. court. I think you have to live in some kind of alternative reality where, regardless, you think it's a good idea to give a convicted terrorist $10.5 million.
As I said to you, I spoke with Khadr last week, and I asked him, lots of questions about whether he felt he deserved this, whether he can't even acknowledge publicly that he's received the money, but of course we know he has. And he said that he really hoped that the apology and the compensation package, which again he doesn't acknowledge, doesn't cause anyone pain, and if it does, he's sorry for the pain that causes.
Oh.
So does it cause you pain? Does it make you angry? When he says something like that, what would you say to him?
It doesn't cause me pain. It makes me angry. And as with Mr. Khadr, his attorney, who have both, they've thrown so many stories, made so many statements, ridiculous statements over the years on motivations, how they feel, how they don't feel, that nothing these people says carries any water with me. It's a simple thing. If Mr. Khadr truly feels bad, I mean, we've all been raised from a very young age, Rosemary, that there's a simple way to make things right. All he's got to do is sign that check over to Tabitha Speer, and I'm sure that he'll feel better, his conscience will be clear, and he'll be helping out a widow with 2 children who's trying to raise them to do a good thing. It won't bring her husband back, but it certainly will honor his memory, and he can at least feel for the rest of his life that he's at least tried to make amends for the horrific crimes he's committed.
Lane Morris, thank you for making the time. I appreciate it, sir.
Thanks for having me, Rosemary.